Were you a 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, 1-star?
I was not. I had no stars.
No
I
stars?
don't think. Yeah, I don't think Ithaca was recruiting stars.
Mike McAllister, how many stars would you give Stephen Fonte if you were?
Steve would have been the first ever 6-star recruit.
Wow, congratulations.
It's kind of you to say. Checks in the mail, Mike. We could go either basketball or football here to start. I think we got to start football, right? With camp opening up tomorrow. You recently put out an article about the 5 things in particular that you're looking forward to seeing, 5 questions that you want answered going into camp, and of course it starts at the quarterback position. So we'll get into other things, but let's start with the QB. Ricky Collins, Steve Angeli. I guess, how do you anticipate this situation playing itself out? And do you think we're going to know the starter in advance of the opener, or do you think it's going to be one of those things that Fran Brown keeps a secret going up till game time against Tennessee?
I think we're going to know, just because that seems to be the way that he's wanted to do things. That was kind of the way he wanted to operate during the spring, was to figure out who the starter was as quickly as possible and give them the first string reps, pretty much throughout. And with as much as there's going to be open to the media, unless they're only going to have stretching of it open to the media as far as practices and such go, at some point, if they do determine internally this is who our starter is, we're going to notice that they're always coming out with the ones, right? So that's sort of going to leak out, trickle its way out, et cetera, as opposed to, I'm not sure how much of a secret he'd actually be able to keep it. So I wouldn't put anything past him, but my guess is he's going to be on the transparent side and pick a winner. But the way that I kind of look at it is I give Ricky Collins a leg up going into it, just because he's been here during the spring and he was named the starter. And just adding Steve Angeli to the roster doesn't, in my mind, immediately say Ricky Collins is no longer the starter. But I do think it's going to be a true quarterback battle. So it'll be interesting to see how Steve looks, how Ricky looks, how they look as far as, comfortable with the offense and playbook and, rapport with the receivers and all that. I'm sure there's been a ton of off-season work that we're not aware of in terms of these guys working with the receivers and trying to get on the same page and all that. So it'll be interesting to see the fruits of that labor.
All right, so aside from the quarterback battle, you and I were actually talking before the show about something else, and you brought up the offensive line, and you said outside of the QBs, that's where your eyes are going to be during preseason camp. Tell us why.
Well, they lose 3 of the 5 starters from the bowl game, and they've brought in 4 or 5 really high-profile offensive linemen. Some interior guys like Austin Collins from Louisville, some guys that have primarily played tackle in their college career, and guys that were former 4- and 5-star recruits. You think about Zach Rice from North Carolina, who was the #1 offensive tackle in his recruiting class and was a 5-star prospect and considered an elite player with elite talent, and hasn't been able to see the field much for the Tar Heels. So does he realize that here in one way or another? Is that by keeping him at tackle? Do they move him inside? We remember at the NFL level, a guy that was very highly thought of but was struggling early in his career was Mekhi Becton with the New York Jets, had played tackle, came over to the Philadelphia Eagles. They moved him to guard, and the Eagles end up winning the Super Bowl with him being really good all season. Could Zach Rice see something similar at the collegiate level where they move him to guard and he really excels there? We don't know, but that's one of the things I'm looking at. And they've got a couple of guys coming back, but there's so much turnover and so many new faces. I'm just really interested to see who jumps out as the starting offensive line, from early on in training camp, and if that changes as camp progresses.
All right, in terms of the skill position players, they did lose a lot from last year, no doubt about it. Trevor Pena transferred, Jackson Meeks, LaQuinn Allen moved on to the NFL, but they've got some capable guys up and coming and looking to fill their shoes. So in terms of the skill position players on offense, who are you most intrigued by heading into 2025?
I think the fact that Justice Ross Simmons is finally healthy. We saw some flashes of him last year, but he was never really 100%. So I'm interested to see how he does this year, being more consistent and perhaps being a #1 or #2 target in the offense. I'm really intrigued by Jonte Cook, the former 5-star wide receiver who went to Texas and then spent part of a semester at Washington and is now here at Syracuse. There's a ton of talent there, and so can Syracuse get that out of them? And if so, I think they have themselves a really dynamic weapon with big-time speed, someone who can impact the return game, maybe even play like a Trevor Pena-type role. So he's really interesting. I'm interested to see what a guy like Emmanuel Ross does, the former 4-star recruit who saw the field a little bit last year, but had a really good spring. We saw some good things from him in the spring game, so interested to see what type of role he can carve out. Those are kind of the main ones at the moment that I'm keeping an eye on. But they've got a lot of options, and then including at tight end behind Dan Villari. Can Dan Villari be more of a consistent receiving threat? There's a guy like Jamie Tremble, a former 4-star tight end. Is he able to come in and become a threat, maybe in the red zone? Interested to see how some of that stuff plays out.
All right, how about the other side of the ball now, the defense? Are you concerned at all about what you see over there, or do you feel like it's going to be a solid unit?
I mean, I think they've got a lot of talent, and I think they did a good job this offseason of addressing some issues with the interior of the defensive line, bringing in guys like George Brooks and Chris Thomas to play at tackle along with the guys that they've got coming back. My biggest concern is pass rush. Last year, Fidel Diggs was the best pass rusher on the team, led the team in sacks, and even despite, playing a little bit of linebacker, Marlo Wax went out, he still led the team in sacks. So he's gone now, obviously, to the NFL. And who is the guy that steps up and can be that consistent pass rush? Because it was very inconsistent outside of him. It felt like when teams double and triple teamed him, Syracuse struggled to consistently get to the quarterback. You got guys like Kevin Jabody that's back from injury. Dennis Jacquez got a lot of reps last year when Jabody was out. They've got some talented guys coming in and some guys from the transfer portal. So, but that's really my biggest concern, not only going into training camp, but going into the season, is who can provide pass rush for Syracuse. And maybe it comes from a linebacker, someone who can blitz and they can use in certain situations a 3-man defensive front and use a linebacker to be the fourth guy in the pass rusher. That's an option as well, but that's certainly one of the main things that I'm concerned about. And then, of course, replacing a guy like Marlo Wax, who is the quarterback of the defense, is never an easy thing to do either.
News came out yesterday, Mike, that Art Monk's jersey will be retired. Who do you think's next in line? Or who else do you think is on the list in the not-too-distant future?
Man, I was thinking about this. My first thought was going back to the quarterback position. Do you honor a recent sort of legend like an Eric Dungy, maybe even a Ryan Nassib? Does he deserve consideration? But the guy that I think is overlooked, whenever you start talking about the best quarterbacks in Syracuse football history, and obviously with the season that Kyle McCord had, he's going to be in that discussion because of how productive he was last season. Does he eventually get into that discussion as having his number retired? I think it's a little too early right now, but I think Marvin Graves is someone that I think, should be honored a little bit more than what he is. But he was just a fantastic quarterback for Syracuse. But, I look at some of those recent guys like Eric Dungy's or the Ryan Nassibs, and you wonder if, some other recent guys on other sides of the ball, like Zaire Franklin, with what he's been able to do in the NFL and all the things that he does off the field as well, given what we know about Fran Brown and the DART mantra and his attention to community service with everything that Zaire Franklin does. He's someone I could see them honoring. But, they've got a lot of guys, I think, in their past that they could certainly honor, and, a lot of all-time greats that still have yet to be recognized. You start thinking back of, like, the George Rooks and the Antoine Pons and the Morlon Greenwoods and a lot of really good players that came through Syracuse football.
All right, let's switch gears and talk
what about
basketball.
putting Coach P? He's the winningest coach, and they should do it soon, too. It's not, he's not getting any younger.
I would. I mean, you're not going to do a jersey retirement in that respect, but doing something where you can maybe have a coach's banner, so to speak, and then put some of your all-time great coaches on there and start it with Coach T. I think that would be a pretty cool thing to do.
Or just put his name up there in all the bowl games he went to. Forget, his record in the bowl games.
Yeah, recognize him in some capacity. Yeah, I think that's certainly a good idea. All right, let's switch gears and talk basketball now. And we've seen that 4-star forward Asher Elson will visit Syracuse in October. What should fans know about this guy? 6'10" forward, currently plays in that overtime elite league. What do we need to know about him?
Yeah, really athletic. Kind of fits in that mold of what Syracuse has been doing at the forward position, specifically power forward. When you think about Donnie Freeman and Sadiq White, that they're trying to get more athletic, more bouncy at that position, longer, and he's a guy that has pretty good shot blocking instincts as well. So just kind of fits in that mold. He's not a guy that's going to be a top 20, top 30 type of a player, but you're not really expecting your entire roster to be filled with guys that are, sort of 5-star, borderline 5-star players. He's certainly a guy that has potential to be a contributor, a starter, and a really good player at the collegiate level. So good for Syracuse to get him on campus, and I think he's maybe the second, third, or fourth, somewhere in that range, guys we've seen from the 2026 recruiting class that are starting to schedule official visits to Syracuse. So it's going to be very busy for them on the recruiting trail this fall.
Mike, are you hearing anything from recruits about the status of Coach Autry, in the recruiting process?
Not that they've communicated to me. So if that's a factor or something they're considering, they're not expressing that publicly or don't want that to be out there publicly. That said, we know that negative recruiting is a thing, and it happens across the country especially when you start getting into, prospects trim their list to 3 teams, to 5 teams, and they're really focused on just a few teams in their recruiting process. That's when the negative recruitment really starts to come out and the big things start to be mentioned to recruits. And that's where I could see, if you've got a situation where it's like Syracuse, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, or, even not all of those heavy hitters, but just some other power conference schools. Yeah, if you've got a situation where it seems from the outside that coaching situation is pretty stable, is that coach going to come in and say, yeah, you could go to Syracuse now, but, hey, in a year they're going to have a new coaching staff? Yeah, I'm sure that will be communicated in some way, shape, or form to try to negatively recruit against Syracuse.
Mike, we're running out of time. We got about 30 seconds, but I do want to get your thoughts about this exhibition game in Buffalo that we're hearing about. Are you surprised that they're going to play an exhibition game away? And I guess, what do you make of this contest against another Division I program?
I am surprised, but I think it's a great thing. We're seeing more and more that teams are playing exhibition games against other power conference teams, other Division I teams in what are basically being used as games. They're not looking at it as an exhibition where it's, let's get everyone in and sort of mess around for 10 minutes and then it'll kind of be the backups and the reserves and the walk-ons. They're trying to schedule opponents where you have to play the game as you would if it was middle of December, middle of January, et cetera, which helps with the coaching staff see which guys look ready for those types of situations. It helps the players sort of get used to game speed, especially incoming players, new players, freshmen. So I think it's a great thing all around. I think it's great for Syracuse to go somewhere else in the state to try to, attract those players from, or those fans, I should say, from places other than Central New York to continue to flock to the Dome to watch the Orange.
Right, and I don't think they can keep the gate money, right? It's got to go to a charity. Is that correct, Steve?
I believe so. It's got to go
when
to
they do these games.
Yeah,
so it makes tons of sense to do it somewhere else.
Doesn't matter where you play.
Yeah.
Right. All right, Mike, we got to run. Thanks so much for coming on. Enjoy your week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, that's Mike McAllister. We'll take a timeout. We'll